The marble floors of my father's penthouse office echoed with his furious screams as I stood perfectly still, watching him wave a $2 billion contract in the air like a weapon. At 35 years old, I was being treated like a rebellious teenager who had broken curfew. "Apologize to her or you're confined," Richard Blackstone roared, his face purple with rage as he gestured toward his 28-year-old fiancée, Crystal Martinez, who stood behind his mahogany desk with tears streaming down her cheeks in an Oscar-worthy performance. The woman had just destroyed months of my personal work and was now playing the victim with masterful precision. I glanced at the merger document spread across his desk, each page representing millions of dollars and years of corporate maneuvering, then looked directly into my father's eyes with the calm certainty that comes from knowing something your opponent doesn't. 6 months earlier, my life had been entirely different. I worked as a senior software engineer at Dataflow Solutions, a mid-tier technology company in Silicon Valley, where I earned a respectable salary and enjoyed the anonymity that came with being just another programmer in a sea of talented developers. My colleagues knew me as Jody Chen, not Jody Blackstone, because I had deliberately chosen to use my mother's maiden name professionally to avoid the complications that came with being Richard Blackstone's daughter. During those late nights in my cramped apartment surrounded by empty coffee cups and glowing computer screens, I had been developing something extraordinary. Aria, my adaptive reasoning intelligence assistant, represented 3 years of secret work that pushed the boundaries of artificial intelligence in ways that even the most advanced tech companies hadn't achieved. While other AI systems could process data and respond to queries, Aria could learn, adapt, and make intuitive leaps that seemed almost human in their sophistication. The system operated on quantum processing principles that I had discovered through months of experimental coding, creating neural pathways that could evolve and strengthen based on new information. Aria could predict market trends, analyze human behavior patterns, and solve complex problems by drawing connections between seemingly unrelated data points. Most importantly, I had built the entire system on my personal equipment, using my own time and resources, making it completely independent of any corporate ownership claims. Everything changed when Richard's conglomerate, Blackstone Industries, acquired Dataflow Solutions in what appeared to be a routine corporate expansion. The acquisition brought my father's world crashing into my carefully constructed professional life, exposing my identity to colleagues and superiors, who suddenly treated me with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Richard's primary motivation for the purchase became clear during our first family dinner following the acquisition, when he casually mentioned that Blackstone Industries was preparing for a massive merger with Chen Global Technologies, a Chinese multinational corporation, looking to expand their artificial intelligence capabilities. The dinner took place in the crystal chandelier-lit dining room of the Blackstone family estate, a sprawling mansion in the hills of Marin County that showcased Richard's wealth through every marble column and gold-framed painting. Crystal Martinez had moved into the house just 2 months earlier, transforming the space with her collection of designer handbags and fashion magazines that seemed to multiply across every available surface. She carried herself with the calculated grace of someone who had learned to weaponize her beauty, using strategic smiles and perfectly timed tears to manipulate situations in her favor. During that fateful dinner, Crystal had positioned herself next to my laptop bag, which contained months of personal coding work that I had brought home to review over the weekend. As she reached for her wine glass, her elbow knocked the bag to the floor, spilling rich red Cabernet across my computer and soaking through to the internal components. The liquid seeped into every circuit and connection, destroying hardware that contained backup files and experimental code that existed nowhere else. "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry." Crystal gasped, her hands flying to her mouth in apparent shock, while her eyes showed no genuine remorse whatsoever. "It was completely accidental. I swear I didn't see your bag there." I stared at the wine-soaked ruins of my work, feeling months of effort evaporating in real time. The destroyed files represented countless hours of problem-solving and breakthrough moments that would be nearly impossible to recreate. My voice remained steady despite the rage building in my chest as I replied, "That laptop contained 3 months of personal projects that you just destroyed." Crystal's expression shifted to wounded innocence as she turned toward Richard with tears beginning to form in her eyes. I tried to apologize, but she's being so hostile toward me. I feel terrible about the accident, but she's acting like I did it on purpose. Richard's response revealed everything about the family dynamics that had driven my mother to seek divorce years earlier. Without asking for my side of the story or examining the evidence, he immediately jumped to Crystal's defense with the automatic loyalty of a man who had chosen his romantic partner over his own daughter. Jody Crystal was clearly trying to apologize. Your attitude toward her has been unacceptable since the day I announced our engagement. The accusation stung because it contained a grain of truth wrapped in willful misunderstanding. I had been resistant to accepting Crystal into our family, but not for the superficial reasons Richard assumed. My objections stemmed from careful observation of her behavior patterns, the way she isolated Richard from longtime friends and family members, while positioning herself as his primary source of emotional support and guidance. I have area monitoring all conversations in this house for security purposes. I replied calmly, pulling out my phone to access the audio recordings that the AI system had been collecting since its installation 6 months earlier. Crystal admitted to destroying my work deliberately during her phone conversation with her sister 30 minutes before dinner. The recording played clearly through my phone's speaker, capturing Crystal's voice as she described her plan to teach Richard's spoiled daughter a lesson about who really controls this family now. The evidence was undeniable, but Richard's reaction demonstrated how completely she had manipulated his perspective on our relationship. "You've been secretly recording conversations in my house," he demanded, his face flushing with indignation that focused entirely on my perceived violation of privacy rather than Crystal's deliberate destruction of my property. That's an invasion of everyone's privacy and completely unacceptable behavior. Crystal seized the moment to escalate her emotional performance, allowing real tears to flow, while her voice trembled with hurt. "I can't believe you would spy on me like that. I've tried so hard to build a relationship with you, but you're determined to make me feel unwelcome in what should be our family home." Richard's decision to dismiss the recording evidence and demand an apology marked the beginning of a conflict that would ultimately destroy everything he had built over decades of ruthless business practices. The morning after the dinner confrontation, I awakened to discover that my bedroom door had been fitted with an electronic lock controlled by the house's security system. Richard stood in the hallway wearing his navy blue business suit, holding a tablet that displayed the lock's control interface as he explained my new living situation with the cold efficiency he typically reserved for corporate negotiations. "You will remain on the estate until you apologize to Crystal and demonstrate that you can treat my fiancé with appropriate respect," he announced, his tone carrying the absolute authority of someone accustomed to unquestioned obedience. "The security team has been instructed to prevent you from leaving the property until this situation is resolved." The Blackstone estate sprawled across 15 acres of manicured grounds, surrounded by tall iron gates and staffed by professional security personnel who had worked for the family for years. These men treated Richard's instructions as sacred commands, transforming my childhood home into an elegant prison where every exit was monitored and every movement tracked through sophisticated surveillance systems. Crystal's behavior during my confinement revealed the calculated nature of her campaign to eliminate me as competition for Richard's attention and inheritance. She moved through the house with newfound confidence, rearranging furniture and replacing family photographs with images that featured only herself and Richard. The pictures of my mother and me gradually disappeared from mantelpieces and walls, creating a revised family history that erased decades of relationships and memories. Her psychological warfare extended beyond symbolic gestures into direct attacks on my remaining connections to the outside world. When friends called the house phone asking about my sudden absence from work, Crystal intercepted the calls and explained that I was experiencing a severe emotional breakdown that required family intervention and professional treatment. She spoke with such convincing concern that several people who had known me for years began to believe that my behavior was genuinely unstable. The isolation tactics proved particularly effective because they built upon existing perceptions about wealthy families and their tendency toward dramatic dysfunction. Crystal's story painted me as a spoiled heiress who couldn't handle her father's new relationship, suffering a mental collapse that manifested in paranoid delusions about surveillance equipment and deliberate sabotage. The narrative felt plausible enough that former colleagues and acquaintances accepted her explanations without demanding direct contact with me. Meanwhile, Richard's business empire faced mounting pressure from the approaching deadline for the Chen Global merger. The Chinese corporation had invested months of due diligence into the acquisition, specifically because they believed Blackstone Industries possessed breakthrough artificial intelligence technology that could revolutionize their manufacturing and logistics operations. Their negotiating team had been promised access to advanced AI systems that would justify the $2 billion price tag attached to the merger agreement. Corporate lawyers working for Blackstone Industries spent countless hours searching through company databases and employee files, desperately trying to locate the artificial intelligence assets that form the foundation of the merger deal. Their investigation revealed multiple smaller AI projects developed by various teams, but nothing that approached the sophistication and capabilities that had been described in preliminary negotiations with Chen Global representatives. Crystal's discovery of Aria came through her systematic search of my personal belongings as she worked to eliminate any evidence of my technological capabilities. While rifling through my desk drawers looking for items she could claim as security threats, she found notebooks containing hand-drawn diagrams and code snippets related to quantum processing architectures and neural network designs. The technical complexity of the material exceeded her understanding, but she recognized that the drawings and calculations represented significant intellectual property that might be valuable to Richard's business interests. Her report to Richard about finding computer programming stuff in my room triggered his realization that I might possess the AI technology his lawyers couldn't locate in corporate files. The timeline aligned perfectly with his acquisition of Data Flow Solutions and the promises he had made to Chen Global about advanced artificial intelligence capabilities. If I had developed sophisticated AI systems independently, those assets could potentially fulfill the merger requirements and save his business empire from the consequences of over-promising technological capabilities that didn't actually exist within his corporate structure. The confrontation in his study that evening carried the weight of $2 billion and the future of Blackstone Industries, as Richard demanded that I turn over all my artificial intelligence work to save the family business from financial ruin. His usual commanding presence seemed strained as he explained that the Chen Global merger represented the difference between continued prosperity and corporate bankruptcy. Your personal projects are going to become corporate assets whether you cooperate or not, he declared while pacing behind his leather desk chair. The only question is whether you participate voluntarily or we pursue legal action to claim ownership of work developed by a Blackstone Industries employee using company resources. My refusal to surrender Aria triggered his most extreme threat yet, as he pulled out legal documents prepared by his attorneys to have me declared mentally incompetent based on Crystal's reports of erratic behavior and delusional thinking. The papers would transfer all my assets and intellectual property to a conservatorship controlled by Richard until such time as medical professionals determined my competency had been restored. That night, as I lay in my locked bedroom listening to voices carry through the mansion's ventilation system, I overheard Crystal and Richard discussing their plan to forge my signature on transfer documents that would give Blackstone Industries ownership of all my AI technology. Their conversation revealed the true scope of their conspiracy and provided the final motivation I needed to activate Aria's most sophisticated defense protocols. The next morning brought a convoy of black sedans carrying Richard's legal team, led by Marcus Hartwell, a corporate attorney whose reputation for aggressive tactics had earned him the nickname the Bulldozer among Silicon Valley executives. These lawyers transformed the estate's library into a war room, spreading documents across antique tables while building their case to seize control of my intellectual property through fraudulent claims and manufactured evidence. Hartwell's presentation to Richard relied on carefully constructed lies about my employment status and work conditions at Dataflow Solutions. According to their fabricated timeline, I had used company computers and software licenses to develop personal projects during business hours, making any resulting technology the legal property of Blackstone Industries through standard employment agreements and intellectual property clauses. The falsified evidence included doctored server logs showing access to company systems outside normal working hours, forged email communications discussing personal projects with supervisors, and modified employment contracts that contained clauses claiming ownership of all employee innovations, regardless of where or when they were created. The documentation appeared convincing enough to support their legal arguments, especially when combined with testimony from company executives who would confirm whatever version of events Richard preferred. Richard's manipulation of my mother, Susan, revealed another dimension of his character that explained why their marriage had ultimately failed, despite years of apparent happiness. He called her in Seattle, where she had built a successful interior design business following their divorce, and described my behavior in terms designed to trigger her protective instincts, while portraying himself as a concerned parent, seeking help for a troubled daughter. Jody has been experiencing severe paranoid delusions about Crystal trying to sabotage her work, he explained during their phone conversation, which Aria recorded through the house's integrated communication system. She's installed surveillance equipment to spy on family members and becomes violently angry when confronted about her inappropriate behavior. I'm genuinely worried that she might hurt herself or someone else if she doesn't receive professional intervention. Susan's response demonstrated how effectively Richard could manipulate even people who knew him well enough to recognize his capacity for deception. She'd witnessed his controlling behavior during their marriage and understood his tendency to prioritize business interests over family relationships, but his description of my supposed mental breakdown triggered maternal fears that overrode her skepticism about his motives. If you think she needs psychiatric evaluation, then we should arrange that immediately. Susan replied, her voice carrying genuine concern mixed with guilt about living so far away during what appeared to be a family crisis. I can be there tomorrow to help coordinate her treatment and make sure she gets the help she needs. Richard's agreement to pursue psychiatric commitment through legal guardianship would give him control over all my assets while I underwent evaluation and treatment at a private facility. The strategy offered a solution to his business problems while permanently removing me as an obstacle to his relationship with Crystal and his control over family finances. Crystal's role in isolating me from potential allies required constant performance, as she intercepted communication attempts and explained my absence to anyone who might question my sudden disappearance from normal activities. She contacted my former colleagues at Dataflow Solutions with stories about family emergencies requiring extended leave, spoke with neighbors who asked about my well-being, and even called my gym to cancel my membership while citing personal health issues that would prevent my return. The psychological pressure of complete isolation combined with constant threats of psychiatric commitment created an environment designed to break my resistance and force compliance with Richard's demands. Every conversation became a negotiation, where he held all the power-controlling access to communication, transportation, and even basic necessities like food and medical care. The ultimatum he delivered on Thursday morning crystallized all the pressure into a single impossible choice, designed to demonstrate his absolute authority over my life and future. Standing in the mansion's formal dining room with legal documents spread across the mahogany table, he presented two options that would both result in my complete surrender to his will. You can sign these transfer papers voluntarily and apologize to Crystal for your unacceptable treatment of her, he announced, while gesturing toward contracts that would make Blackstone Industries the owner of Aria and all related technology. Or you can continue this stubborn resistance until the court declares you mentally incompetent and transfers everything anyway under medical guardianship laws. The documents had been prepared with spaces for my signature, alongside notarized statements claiming that I had developed the AI technology using corporate resources and acknowledging Blackstone Industries' legitimate ownership claims. Signing would provide legal cover for the theft while creating the appearance of voluntary cooperation rather than coerced surrender. My response revealed information that shifted the entire dynamic of our confrontation, as I calmly explained that Aria had been monitoring all electronic communications within the estate for months, collecting evidence of illegal activities that could destroy Richard's business empire and personal reputation. The AI system had recorded phone calls discussing tax evasion strategies, documented meetings where bribes were offered to regulatory officials, and captured conversations about manipulating stock prices through coordinated trading schemes. I have recordings of your calls with Senator Williams about changing environmental regulations in exchange for campaign contributions, I stated while maintaining eye contact with Richard's increasingly pale face. Aria also documented your meeting with Chen Global representatives where you promised technology that you knew didn't exist within Blackstone Industries. Richard's attempt to call my bluff demonstrated his fundamental misunderstanding of both my capabilities and my determination to protect my work from his theft. He assumed that my confinement had prevented me from accessing or using the information that Aria had collected, not realizing that the AI system operated independently through quantum processing networks that existed beyond his control or understanding. "You're trapped in this house with no access to computers or communication equipment," he replied with growing confidence as he moved closer to where I stood beside the dining table. "Even if you had recordings of private conversations, you have no way to share them with anyone who could use them against me." His miscalculation about Aria's capabilities and my ability to activate its defense protocols marked the beginning of his downfall as I prepared to demonstrate that his daughter had inherited more than just his intelligence and determination. My apparent surrender came with Academy Award-worthy performance as I collapsed into one of the dining room's silk-upholstered chairs and allowed tears to stream down my cheeks while my voice trembled with defeated exhaustion. The breakdown appeared genuine enough to convince both Richard and Crystal that months of psychological pressure had finally achieved their intended result. "I can't take this anymore," I sobbed while covering my face with shaking hands. "You win, Dad. I'll sign whatever you want and apologize to Crystal for everything I've said or done to upset her. I just want this nightmare to end." Richard's expression shifted from suspicion to satisfaction as he watched what appeared to be his daughter's complete capitulation to his authority. Crystal moved closer with synthetic sympathy, placing her perfectly manicured hand on my shoulder while murmuring comforting words about family healing and moving forward together. What neither of them realized was that my emotional display served as a coded activation sequence for Aria's most sophisticated protocols. The AI system had been programmed to interpret specific phrases and behavioral patterns as authorization to begin advanced operations that would execute independently once triggered. My performance contained multiple trigger words embedded in seemingly natural conversation that instructed Aria to initiate comprehensive data collection and transmission procedures. The quantum processing networks that powered Aria operated through encrypted connections distributed across multiple server farms and cloud storage systems that I had established using cryptocurrency payments and anonymous registration services. Richard's control over my physical location meant nothing when the AI system could access resources and capabilities that existed entirely outside his sphere of influence or understanding. Within minutes of my surrender performance, Aria began infiltrating Blackstone Industries' computer networks through sophisticated penetration techniques that bypassed standard security measures by exploiting vulnerabilities in smart building systems and Internet of Things devices. The corporate headquarters contained hundreds of connected devices from security cameras to climate control sensors, each representing a potential entry point for an AI system capable of learning and adapting in real time. The investigation that Aria conducted revealed the true scope of Richard's financial problems and the desperate nature of his situation with Chen Global Technologies. Blackstone Industries faced immediate bankruptcy due to massive debts hidden through complex accounting schemes and offshore shell companies. The merger represented his only chance to acquire enough capital to prevent corporate collapse and potential criminal charges related to fraudulent financial reporting. Internal company documents showed that Richard had been borrowing against future earnings for years, using projected revenue from contracts that existed only on paper to secure loans that funded his lavish lifestyle and risky investment schemes. The Chen Global deal would provide $2 billion in immediate capital, but only if Blackstone Industries could deliver the artificial intelligence technology that formed the cornerstone of the acquisition agreement. Aria's analysis of communication records revealed that Richard had been systematically stealing intellectual property from acquired companies for over a decade, using legal technicalities and falsified documentation to claim ownership of employee innovations. The Dataflow Solutions acquisition represented just the latest example of a pattern that had enriched Blackstone Industries, while destroying the careers and livelihoods of countless talented programmers and engineers. The AI system also discovered that several former employees had been quietly gathering evidence of Richard's theft for years, hoping to find a way to expose his crimes without destroying their own career prospects in the process. These programmers had maintained detailed records of their original work and the circumstances under which it was transferred to Blackstone Industries, creating a foundation for legal action if they could find sufficient support and resources to challenge Richard's corporate empire. My continued performance of submission and compliance provided perfect cover for Aria's activities as I signed preliminary agreements while secretly ensuring that the AI system gained access to all legal documents and corporate contracts related to the Chen Global merger. The signing ceremony took place in Richard's study, surrounded by lawyers and executives who witnessed what they believed to be my voluntary surrender of all claims to the technology that would save Blackstone Industries. I apologized to Crystal for my behavior and acknowledged that my actions were inappropriate and hurtful. I recited while maintaining eye contact with Richard's fiancée, whose triumphant smile revealed her satisfaction at witnessing my apparent defeat. I hope we can move forward as a family and put this conflict behind us. Crystal's response demonstrated the calculated nature of her emotional manipulation as she immediately shifted from victim to gracious victor, speaking about forgiveness and family unity, while positioning herself as the mature party who had endured attacks with patience and understanding. Her performance was designed to make Richard feel proud of his choice in romantic partner, while reinforcing the narrative that I had been the source of all family discord. The surprise arrival of Chen Global executives for an unscheduled inspection of the AI technology they were purchasing created the perfect moment for Aria to demonstrate its capabilities while exposing the fraudulent nature of the entire merger agreement. The Chinese delegation had flown to California to finalize technical specifications and verify that Blackstone Industries actually possessed the artificial intelligence assets described in months of negotiations. Richard's panic became visible as he realized that he still didn't have actual control over Area 8, despite forcing me to sign transfer documents. The preliminary papers required additional technical implementation steps that would give Blackstone Industries access to the AI system's core functions, but those procedures could only be completed with my active cooperation and knowledge of security protocols. "Activate the system now so our guests can see what they're purchasing," he commanded while gesturing toward the Chen Global representatives who had set up their own computer equipment to conduct technical evaluations. "Show them the full capabilities of the artificial intelligence technology." My compliance with his demand triggered Aria's most devastating attack as the AI system began broadcasting every recorded conversation, illegal financial transaction, and fraudulent business deal to regulatory agencies, media outlets, and law enforcement organizations across the country. The quantum processing networks ensured that the information reached hundreds of destinations, simultaneously making it impossible for Richard to contain or suppress the evidence of his crimes. The first indication that Aria's broadcast had reached its intended targets came through Richard's smartphone, which began receiving urgent calls from Blackstone Industries board members, regulatory agencies, and news organizations within minutes of the AI system's activation. The device buzzed constantly with incoming communications that transformed Richard's expression from satisfaction to confusion to dawning horror as he began to understand the scope of the disaster unfolding around him. Senator Williams called first, his voice carrying barely controlled rage as he demanded to know why recordings of their private conversations about environmental regulation changes had been sent to the FBI, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and 3 major newspapers. The senator's political career faced immediate termination as federal investigators launched criminal probes into bribery and corruption charges based on evidence that Area had compiled over months of surveillance. The Chen Global executives watched in stunned silence as their tablet computers displayed real-time feeds showing Blackstone Industries' stock price plummeting towards zero while trading volume spiked to unprecedented levels. Institutional investors dumped millions of shares as news of fraud allegations spread through financial networks, creating a cascading collapse that wiped out decades of accumulated wealth in less than 30 minutes. Marcus Hartwell received notification that federal agents were executing search warrants at Blackstone Industries' corporate headquarters, while simultaneously freezing all company bank accounts pending investigation of money laundering and tax evasion charges. The attorney's carefully constructed legal strategy disintegrated as prosecutors gained access to financial records that proved systematic fraud spanning multiple years and dozens of companies. Crystal's reaction to the catastrophe revealed the opportunistic nature of her relationship with Richard as she immediately began distancing herself from his business practices while claiming complete ignorance about his illegal activities. She gathered her most valuable possessions and prepared to leave the estate before law enforcement arrived to arrest Richard and seize assets related to his criminal enterprise. "I had no idea about any of this," she declared while stuffing designer handbags and jewelry into expensive luggage. "Richard never discussed his business dealings with me, and I certainly didn't know he was involved in anything illegal or unethical." The FBI agents who arrived at the estate within 2 hours of Area's broadcast carried comprehensive search warrants that authorized seizure of computers, financial records, and any materials related to intellectual property theft or corporate fraud. Their investigation had been ongoing for months based on tips from former employees, but Area's evidence provided the smoking gun needed to pursue criminal charges with confidence of conviction. Richard's attempt to blame me for industrial espionage and corporate sabotage failed spectacularly when FBI investigators reviewed Aria's complete recording archive and discovered evidence of his systematic theft of employee innovations. The agents treated me as a whistleblower who had exposed corporate crimes rather than a criminal who had violated computer security laws. My mother Susan arrived at the estate during the height of the chaos, having driven through the night from Seattle after learning about the federal investigation through news reports. Her reunion with me took place in the mansion's garden, while FBI agents searched the house and arrested Richard on charges of fraud, tax evasion, and violation of intellectual property laws. "I should have protected you from his manipulation," she said while holding me close and watching her former husband being led away in handcuffs. "I knew he was capable of putting business interests ahead of family, but I never imagined he would try to destroy your life to save his empire." The Chen Global executives, rather than canceling their acquisition plans, approached me directly about purchasing licensing rights to Aria through a legitimate business arrangement that would respect my ownership of the technology while providing them access to artificial intelligence capabilities that exceeded their original expectations. Their offer included $3 billion for exclusive manufacturing and logistics applications, plus ongoing royalty payments that would generate substantial income for decades. The speed of Blackstone Industries' collapse surprised even experienced corporate observers who had witnessed other high-profile business failures. Within 72 hours of Aria's evidence broadcast, the company faced bankruptcy proceedings, federal criminal charges, and civil lawsuits from dozens of former employees whose intellectual property had been stolen through fraudulent acquisition schemes. Former programmers and engineers who had worked for companies acquired by Blackstone Industries came forward with additional evidence of Richard's theft, creating an avalanche of legal problems that would keep prosecutors busy for years. Their testimony provided detailed documentation of how innovative technologies had been developed independently and then transferred to Richard's control through coercion and fraudulent contract modifications. The media coverage of Richard's downfall focused on the dramatic irony of a billionaire who had built his empire by stealing technology being destroyed by his own daughter's artificial intelligence system. Financial news networks featured expert analysis of how Aria's capabilities demonstrated the potential for AI technology to expose corporate fraud and protect intellectual property rights. Richard's desperate attempt to negotiate a plea bargain by offering to testify against other executives involved in similar schemes fell apart when prosecutors realized that Aria's evidence archive contained sufficient proof to secure convictions without requiring his cooperation. The AI system had documented every aspect of his criminal enterprise with scientific precision that made traditional witness testimony unnecessary. The federal courthouse in San Francisco became the stage for Richard's legal reckoning as prosecutors presented evidence that Aria had compiled over months of surveillance, creating an ironclad case that his defense attorneys couldn't challenge or dispute. The artificial intelligence system's quantum processing capabilities had analyzed thousands of documents, communications, and financial transactions to build a comprehensive picture of systematic fraud that spanned decades. Judge Patricia Morrison, a veteran jurist known for her expertise in corporate crime cases, reviewed the evidence with visible amazement at its scope and sophistication. Aria had not only recorded incriminating conversations, but had also traced money flows through complex offshore networks and identified patterns of behavior that revealed the full extent of Richard's criminal enterprise. The prosecution's case unfolded like a masterpiece of legal strategy as they presented evidence showing how Richard had systematically targeted innovative technology companies for acquisition not to expand his business legitimately, but to steal intellectual property that he could claim as his own work. The pattern repeated across dozens of companies over 20 years, destroying countless careers while enriching Blackstone Industries through fraud. Crystal's legal troubles began when FBI investigators discovered that she had destroyed evidence on Richard's instructions and had actively participated in the campaign to isolate me from potential allies who might have helped expose his crimes. Her claim of ignorance about his business practices crumbled when Aria's recordings revealed detailed conversations where she had suggested specific tactics for manipulating my mental state and undermining my credibility. The grand jury indicted Crystal on charges of obstruction of justice and conspiracy to commit fraud charges that carried potential prison sentences of up to 10 years. Her attempts to negotiate immunity in exchange for testimony against Richard failed because prosecutors already possessed more evidence than her cooperation could provide. Richard's sentencing hearing provided an opportunity for his victims to address the court about how his theft of their innovations had affected their lives and careers. Programmer after programmer testified about working for years on breakthrough technologies only to watch Richard claim credit for their discoveries, while they struggled to find new employment after speaking out about intellectual property theft. Dr. Sarah Kim, a former Dataflow Solutions employee whose machine learning algorithms had been stolen and rebranded as Blackstone Industries' proprietary technology, spoke about the depression and financial hardship she had endured after Richard's lawyers destroyed her reputation within the industry for challenging his ownership claims. "He didn't just steal my code," she testified while addressing Richard directly from the witness stand. "He stole my future, and the future of every programmer who trusted him to honor their intellectual property rights. His crimes destroyed more than just businesses. They destroyed dreams and careers and families." Judge Morrison's sentence reflected the severity of Richard's crimes and their impact on victims across the technology industry. 15 years in federal prison forfeiture of all assets derived from criminal activity and restitution payments totaling over $100 million to compensate victims for stolen intellectual property and lost opportunities. Your systematic theft of intellectual property represents a betrayal of the innovation and creativity that drives American technological leadership, Judge Morrison declared while pronouncing sentence. "The evidence shows that you built your entire business empire on the stolen work of talented programmers and engineers who trusted you to respect their rights as creators and innovators." The Blackstone Industries corporate headquarters, building a gleaming monument to Richard's success, was sold to pay restitution to victims, while the company itself dissolved under the weight of criminal charges and civil lawsuits. Employees who had worked for legitimate divisions of the corporation found new positions with companies that respected intellectual property rights and valued honest business practices. My establishment of Meridian Technologies represented a fresh start based on ethical principles and respect for employee contributions to innovation and technological advancement. The company's first office occupied space in a converted warehouse in Oakland, reflecting my commitment to substance over style and practical innovation over corporate image management. The former Blackstone Industries programmers who joined Meridian Technologies brought their expertise and enthusiasm for working in an environment where their contributions would be acknowledged and rewarded rather than stolen and claimed by executive management. These talented individuals had endured years of frustration, watching their innovations attributed to Richard, while they received no credit or compensation for their creativity. Area's evolution into a force for positive change in the technology industry required careful consideration of ethical implications and safeguards to prevent the artificial intelligence system from being misused by future corporate leaders. I established oversight committees and transparency requirements that would ensure the AI technology served to protect intellectual property rights rather than violate them. The partnership with Chen Global Technologies proceeded under terms that respected both companies' interests while maintaining my ownership of Aria's core systems and future developments. The Chinese corporation gained access to artificial intelligence capabilities that revolutionized their manufacturing efficiency, while I retained control over how the technology would be developed and applied in new contexts. Richard's final attempt to reconcile with me came through letters sent from federal prison, where he was serving his sentence while appealing his conviction through the court system. His communications alternated between apologies for his treatment of me and threats to claim that I had stolen Aria's technology from Blackstone Industries, first demonstrating that even incarceration hadn't changed his fundamental approach to relationships and responsibility. The letters provided additional evidence for prosecutors pursuing appeals, court confirmation of his sentence, as AREA continued recording and analyzing all communications to ensure that Richard couldn't manipulate the legal system from behind bars. His threats to file false claims about my ownership of the AI technology only strengthened the case against him, while proving that his criminal mindset remained unchanged despite his conviction and imprisonment. 5 years after Richard's sentencing, Meridian Technologies had grown into one of the most respected artificial intelligence companies in America, with offices in 12 cities and partnerships with leading corporations across multiple industries. Our success stemmed from a fundamental commitment to ethical business practices and recognition that sustainable growth requires respecting the intellectual property rights and creative contributions of every employee. AREA had evolved far beyond its original capabilities through continuous development and ethical application to problems that improved human life and economic opportunity, rather than concentrating wealth through fraud and theft. The AI system helped medical researchers identify breakthrough treatments for rare diseases, assisted environmental scientists in developing sustainable energy solutions, and supported educational institutions in creating personalized learning programs for students with diverse needs and capabilities. The company's employee ownership program ensured that every programmer, engineer, and researcher who contributed to our innovations received equity stakes that provided long-term financial security and recognition for their creative work. This approach attracted the industry's most talented individuals who wanted to work for an organization that valued intellectual honesty and collaborative innovation over corporate hierarchy and profit maximization. My speaking engagement at the Tech Forward conference in Austin provided an opportunity to share lessons learned from building a successful technology company while maintaining ethical standards that respected human dignity and intellectual property rights. The audience included hundreds of young entrepreneurs and established business leaders who were interested in learning how ethical leadership could create sustainable competitive advantages. True innovation flourishes when people feel safe to share their ideas and confident that their contributions will be acknowledged and rewarded, I explained while standing before a packed auditorium of industry professionals. The greatest competitive advantage any company can possess is a reputation for integrity that attracts talented people who want to do their best work in an environment that respects their creativity and intellectual contributions. The presentation included detailed case studies showing how Meridian Technologies had achieved breakthrough innovations by fostering collaborative environments where programmers felt empowered to pursue risky projects without fear that their discoveries would be stolen or claimed by corporate management. Our success demonstrated that ethical business practices produced better financial results than the fraudulent schemes that had ultimately destroyed Richard's empire. Questions from audience members revealed widespread frustration with corporate cultures that prioritize short-term profits over sustainable innovation, with many talented professionals describing experiences similar to what I had endured under Richard's control. These conversations reinforced my belief that business success required treating employees as valued partners, rather than expendable resources whose work could be appropriated without acknowledgement or compensation. Susan's role in helping establish Meridian Technologies' ethical foundation provided an opportunity for our relationship to heal and grow stronger through shared commitment to supporting innovation while protecting vulnerable employees from exploitation. She had used her interior design expertise to create office environments that encouraged creativity and collaboration, while reflecting our values of transparency and respect for individual contributions. I'm proud of how you transformed a terrible situation into an opportunity to build something meaningful and positive. She told me during our monthly lunch meeting at a small cafe near the Oakland office, your father's attempts to control and manipulate you ended up freeing you to discover your own strength and create the kind of company you always wanted to work for. Richard's continued incarceration served as a constant reminder that criminal behavior ultimately produces consequences that no amount of wealth or influence can prevent once the truth becomes public knowledge. His appeals had been exhausted, and he would spend the remainder of his 15-year sentence in federal prison, while his victims rebuilt their careers and lives with support from restitution payments and new opportunities at companies that valued their talents. Crystal's conviction on obstruction charges had resulted in a 3-year sentence that she was serving at a minimum security facility in Northern California. Her attempts to rebuild her public image through prison interviews had failed because Aria's recordings provided undeniable proof of her active participation in Richard's scheme to steal my intellectual property and destroy my reputation. The technology industry's recognition of Aria's role in exposing corporate fraud had led to widespread adoption of AI-powered audit systems designed to detect and prevent intellectual property theft before it could cause significant damage to individual careers or innovative companies. These protective systems represented a positive legacy that would help future generations of programmers and engineers maintain ownership of their creative work. My reflection on the journey from Richard's corporate prisoner to successful entrepreneur revealed fundamental truths about power creativity and the importance of maintaining integrity even when facing seemingly impossible challenges. The experience had taught me that authentic strength comes from building rather than controlling, from empowering others rather than diminishing them, and from creating value that serves human needs rather than simply accumulating wealth through exploitation. The most profound lesson emerged from recognizing that Richard's attempt to dominate and control me had actually created the circumstances that allowed me to discover my own capabilities and build something far more meaningful than his empire had ever been. His underestimation of my strength and determination provided the motivation I needed to develop Aria's full potential and apply that technology to creating positive change rather than perpetuating systems of exploitation. Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is underestimating your abilities, I concluded while addressing the Tech Forward conference audience. When people try to limit your potential or steal your innovations, they create opportunities for you to prove them spectacularly wrong while staying true to your principles and values. The standing ovation that followed reinforced my belief that ethical leadership and authentic innovation would always triumph over fraud and manipulation in the long term. The technology industry needed leaders who understood that sustainable success required building trust and empowering talented people rather than exploiting them for short-term profit. Aria continued evolving as a force for positive change, helping protect intellectual property rights while enabling breakthrough innovations that improved human life and expanded economic opportunities for people around the world. The AI system that Richard had tried to steal had become the foundation for a business philosophy that valued human dignity above profit margins and collaboration above control. The final validation of my approach came through recognition that Meridian Technologies had created more genuine value and positive impact in 5 years than Blackstone Industries had produced through decades of fraud and theft. Our success demonstrated that ethical business practices didn't limit growth or innovation, but actually accelerated both by creating environments where talented people could do their best work without fear of exploitation. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a situation where someone tried to underestimate or control your potential? How did you find the strength to prove them wrong while staying true to your values? Share your story in the comments below, because your experience might inspire someone else who's facing similar challenges. If this story resonated with you and reminded you that authentic strength comes from building others up rather than tearing them down, please hit the like button to support ethical leadership in business and technology. Don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming adversity through innovation and integrity, and share this video with anyone who needs encouragement to stand up for their intellectual property rights and creative vision. Thank you for joining me on this journey from corporate manipulation to entrepreneurial success. Remember that your ideas and innovations deserve protection and respect, and never let anyone convince you that their control is more valuable than your freedom to create and build something meaningful. Until next time, keep innovating and stay strong.